My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been called a lot of things. But the one I'll never forget is whispered at the edge of a party, just loud enough for the laughter to ripple around the room like poison in champagne. "She's just a waitress," my mother said. She didn't know I was standing 10 feet behind her, holding the tray of smoked salmon bites she was too busy gossiping to notice. That night changed everything. But to really understand what happened the next morning, when I arrived in a Rolls Royce and the manager said, "Welcome back, boss," you need to know what led up to that moment. I was 25 when I dropped out of my MBA program to take care of my grandmother. She had raised me when my parents were too busy chasing business success and social clout. While they traveled and built their empire, it was Grandma Joan who packed my school lunches, read me bedtime stories, and taught me that kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. When she got sick, I couldn't just put her in a home like my parents suggested. So I came back to my hometown and took a job at Delaney's, a local upscale restaurant, waiting tables at night and caregiving during the day. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. It also gave me something else: a front row seat to the kind of power games my family thrived on. My mother, Carol Morgan, ran a local PR firm. Think pristine white blouses, sharp heels, and even sharper smiles. My father, Harold, was a partner in a logistics company. My younger sister, Vanessa, had just gotten engaged to the son of one of my father's business associates. That engagement party? It was the social event of the month, and apparently I wasn't invited. Technically. Vanessa had said, "You're welcome to stop by after your shift, Rach." No need to dress up. No need to dress up. That should have been the first clue. But I went anyway. I clocked out at Delaney's at 7:45 p.m., still in uniform, and walked the 3 blocks to my parents' house. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted to congratulate my sister. I brought her a small gift, a vintage pendant Grandma Joan had once told me she loved as a child. I walked in through the side entrance like I used to when I lived there. The house hadn't changed. Same polished floors, same glimmering chandelier in the foyer. I made my way toward the garden where the party was being held. That's when I heard it. "She's just a waitress," my mother whispered, her voice honeyed with mock concern. I mean, it's tragic, really. So much potential. "And she serves food now." For tips, a chorus of polite laughter followed. "She won't be here long," she added. "She said she might stop by. Let's pray she doesn't bring one of those tragic trays with her." I stood there, rooted to the spot. I hadn't brought a tray, but I might as well have. When I finally stepped outside and walked onto the terrace, a few heads turned. My mother's smile stiffened, like plastic. Vanessa blinked like she didn't recognize me. And my father? He avoided eye contact entirely. I handed Vanessa the small wrapped gift. "Congratulations," I said, my voice even. "Oh," she said awkwardly. "Thanks, you didn't have to. We weren't sure you'd make it." Neither was I. The silence that followed was unbearable. I left after 15 minutes before the first toast. Nobody tried to stop me. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment above the bakery, the pendant box unopened on the kitchen table. My grandmother had passed away 3 months earlier, and I was alone for the first time in my life. But that night, something changed. Not just the shame or the sting of my mother's voice. No, what changed was a decision. I was done being quiet. Done letting them define me. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just a waitress. I had started a side business during those long nights after my shifts, an anonymous blog about restaurant management and profitability. That blog had gone viral in certain circles. Investors had reached out. Deals had been signed. And 3 weeks before that party, I had officially become the majority shareholder of the company that owned Delaney's. The restaurant I had waited tables in? I owned it now. But I hadn't told anyone yet. That was about to change. The next morning, I showed up at Delaney's in a charcoal pantsuit, heels, and a quiet fire burning behind my eyes. I stepped out of a car I'd had delivered from a luxury rental service. For impact, The Rolls-Royce Phantom purred like a cat in the morning sun. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the manager, Philip, stepped forward and smiled. "Welcome back, boss." I walked through the front doors of my own restaurant, knowing that by noon, my entire family would know exactly who I was. By 9:15 a.m., word had started to spread. In small whispers, over espresso machines and beneath polished marble countertops, staff who had once worked beside me were now realizing something had changed. That the woman they used to split late-night shifts with was now the one signing their paychecks. "Did she buy Delaney's?" "I thought she was just a waitress." "No. Did you see the car?" I heard the murmurs but kept my expression neutral as I walked through the restaurant like I had 1,000 times before. Only now, the energy around me had shifted. Respect, confusion, curiosity, even a little fear. Philip, the general manager, walked beside me, his clipboard clutched against his chest. "Everyone's in the staff room. You ready?" I nodded. "Let's not keep them waiting." He led me past the kitchen, where chefs paused mid-prep to glance in my direction, and into the staff room where around a dozen employees sat waiting. Some were newer faces, others old friends. Jess, who I used to split tables with on Friday nights. Louise from back of house. Even Yvonne, the sharp-tongued hostess who once told me I was too smart to serve food. She raised an eyebrow as I stepped in. Philip cleared his throat. "Thanks for coming in early, everyone. We have an important announcement this morning. As of last month, Delaney's changed ownership." A ripple of surprise went through the room. I kept my hands folded in front of me, the image of calm. Philip gestured to me. "Please welcome your new majority owner and executive director, Rachel Morgan." Dead silence. Jess's eyes widened. Louise let out a low whistle. Yvonne's jaw literally dropped. I took a breath and stepped forward. "Hi. I know this is unexpected. Some of you have known me as a server here. Some of you might only know my name from the roster. But for the past 2 years, I've been quietly working on building something bigger." I paused, letting the tension simmer. Through that work, I've acquired a controlling interest in this restaurant and 2 others in the metro area. Delaney's is the flagship, and starting today, we're making some changes. Another beat. We're increasing wages by 8% across the board. We're adding wellness stipends, and everyone here will now get quarterly bonuses based on performance and team success. Gasps and murmurs broke out. Jess put a hand over her mouth. "But more than that," I continued, voice steady, "I want this place to be what it always could have been. A restaurant that values people, not just profits. I've been on your side of the table. I know what it's like to pick up a shift on your birthday because rent's due. I know what it's like to smile while customers talk down to you. That ends here." Luis raised his hand slowly. "So, you really own this place now?" I smiled. "I do, and I plan to make it better." Jess laughed softly. "My mom is never going to believe this. She still thinks you're bussing tables." Yvonne stood slowly. "So all those nights we thought you were just another burned-out grad school dropout." "I was," I said honestly, "but I also had a plan." Her gaze flicked toward Philip, then back to me. "And now you're the boss." "I'm still Rachel, but yes, I'm also the boss." It was surreal, standing there in a room where I used to blend into the background, and yet I wasn't angry. I wasn't there for revenge. Not exactly. But my family? They were going to find out. Soon. Because at 11 a.m., my mother had scheduled a client lunch. At Delaney's, in the private dining room. She had no idea. I turned to Philip. "Let's make sure everything is perfect. I'll be sitting in on that lunch." He nodded, hiding a grin. "Of course, boss." By 10:45 a.m., the room was set. Fresh linens, polished glassware. The menu customized with the client's name at the top. Carol Morgan PR had spared no expense. I stood just out of sight, behind the tinted glass partition as my mother breezed in wearing her signature power suit and heels that clicked with authority. She didn't notice me. Not yet. She was too busy barking instructions to the waiter. Marcus, who was clearly trying not to roll his eyes. "Get my usual table," she snapped, "and make sure no one disturbs us." 10 minutes later, her client arrived. A woman in a crisp navy blazer and expensive pearls. They exchanged fake smiles and air kisses. As they were seated, my mother leaned in close and whispered something. And just like that, I heard it again. "She's just a waitress. My older daughter. Brilliant, but emotionally impulsive. Wasted at all waiting tables." Only this time I smiled. Because in less than 5 minutes, I was going to walk through that door, take the head seat at the table, and introduce myself not as her daughter, but as the new executive director of Delaney's. And I couldn't wait to see her face when she realized the waitress now owned the floor she was standing on. I watched them from behind the frosted glass. My mother all poise and performance, gesturing gracefully with her hands, a curated smile plastered on her face. She was in her element, charming a new client, flaunting her status, casually humiliating anyone who didn't match her version of success. "Rachel?" Philip whispered from behind me. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" I nodded. "It has to come from me." He gave a small, proud smile. "Then go knock them out." At exactly 11:07 a.m., I walked into the private dining room. The door slid open silently. My heels clicked against the polished floor. Deliberately so. My mother glanced up, ready to scold a server for interrupting. And then she froze. So did the client. I stepped forward calmly and extended a hand to the woman across from her. "Hello, I'm Rachel Morgan, Executive Director of Delaney's and majority shareholder in Morgan Hospitality Group. I just wanted to personally welcome you and thank you for dining with us." The client blinked in surprise, then stood to shake my hand. "Oh, well, it's an honor. I wasn't expecting—" My mother finally found her voice. "Rachel? What? What are you doing here?" "Running the restaurant," I replied simply. "Didn't Philip tell you? Delaney's changed ownership. I oversee all operations now." There was no anger in my tone, just professionalism. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. Her face paled, the fake smile dissolving under the weight of reality. The client turned to her. "This is your daughter? You didn't mention she owned the restaurant." My mother laughed weakly. "Oh, well, Rachel's had many ventures. I wasn't aware she owned this one." I raised an eyebrow. "You weren't aware because you never asked." There was silence. A heavy, pregnant pause where everyone seemed to breathe in the shift of power. I gestured toward the menus. "Please enjoy your lunch. The chef has prepared a few specials for you, and everything today is on the house." The client smiled, impressed. "Thank you, Ms. Morgan. That's very generous of you." "You're welcome. If you need anything, I'll be just outside." I turned and left the room without looking back, but I didn't need to. I could feel the tension simmering behind me like a pot ready to boil over. Back in the hallway, Philip handed me a fresh espresso. "You good?" "Better than good," I said, taking a sip. I think she's finally speechless. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because that evening I received a text from Vanessa. "Dinner at Mom and Dad's, 6:30. Apparently there's something we all need to discuss." I almost ignored it. But something in me, a flicker of the old Rachel who still craved acknowledgement, told me to go. At 6:25, I pulled into the driveway in the Rolls-Royce again. A different car than the one I'd rented that morning. This one? I'd bought it. With cash. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden streaks over the familiar suburban lawn. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. White shutters, blue hydrangeas, and that perfect red front door that used to feel like a welcome sign. Now, it just looked like a stage. Inside, everyone was already gathered. Vanessa sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. My father stood near the fireplace, drink in hand. And my mother? She was pacing. She stopped when she saw me. "You could have given us a heads up," she said flatly. "Would it have made a difference?" I asked, setting my keys down calmly. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. "In front of a major client." "No," I corrected. "You embarrassed yourself by lying about who I was. I just told the truth." My father raised his hand. "Let's not fight. Carol, sit down." She did, reluctantly. Vanessa finally looked up. "So, you really own Delaney's now?" "I do, and 2 more locations, and we're opening a 4th next spring." My mother snorted softly. "With what money?" "With the money I made from my blog, private consulting, and a few smart partners who believed in me before my own family did." Silence. Then my father asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell us?" I shrugged. "You never listened. Why would this have been different?" My mother's lip curled. "So what is this? Revenge? Prove us wrong theater?" "No," I said, standing straighter. "This is me living the life I built without your approval. But today made one thing clear. Your opinion doesn't define me anymore." Vanessa nodded slowly. "I mean, respect." It was the closest thing to praise I'd ever heard from her. My father cleared his throat. "Well, congratulations, Rachel. That's quite an achievement." I didn't reply, because the truth was, I didn't need their validation anymore. I stood there in the living room of the people who used to belittle me, now watching them squirm in the shadow of their own assumptions. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was free. 2 days passed before I heard from my mother again. A single text. "Are you free for coffee?" Just us. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure if it was an olive branch or a trap. We hadn't had a real one-on-one conversation in over a year. Even when Grandma Joan passed, my mother was all logistics. Funeral arrangements, seating charts, menu selections. Not grief, not connection. Still, something told me to go. We met at a sleek little cafe downtown, the kind she always preferred. All white marble and glass, expensive but minimal. I arrived first. She came in 3 minutes late, as usual, and sat across from me without a word. Her coffee order was complicated, of course. Mine was black. The silence between us felt heavier than it used to. She took a sip, placed the cup down carefully, and finally spoke. "You didn't just buy a restaurant," she said quietly. "You built an empire." I said nothing. "I looked up the blog," she continued. "Didn't even know you wrote." "You never asked." A long pause. I suppose I didn't. She looked older than I remembered. Not physically, but in her eyes. Like something inside her was starting to fray at the edges. She glanced at me again, hesitant now. Vulnerable in a way I had never seen. "Why didn't you tell me, Rachel?" "About any of it?" "I tried," I said. "A dozen times. You'd cut me off, change the subject. Compare me to Vanessa. It became easier not to try." She exhaled slowly and stared into her cup. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From failure," she said, finally meeting my gaze. "From embarrassment. From throwing your life away chasing ideas that didn't make sense to us." "Didn't make sense to you," I corrected, "but they made sense to me." "I know that now." Another pause. This time I let it sit. Let her feel the discomfort I had carried for years. She glanced out the window, then said, "Your grandmother would be proud." That hit harder than I expected. She was the only one who never doubted me, I said, my voice quiet. "She believed in things we didn't understand," my mother admitted, "and now I wish I'd listened to her more." There it was. Not quite an apology, but something close. She stirred her coffee again, slowly. "Your father and we didn't know how to support something we couldn't control. We raised you to follow a plan. When you deviated from it, we panicked. And judged." "Yes," she said to her credit. "And judged." We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the cafe surrounding us like static. Then she asked something unexpected. Would you ever consider consulting for my agency? I blinked. What? PR is changing. Digital strategy, storytelling. Your skills could help us. And frankly, I'd rather bring you in than hire another overpriced agency that doesn't get it. It wasn't just a peace offering. It was respect, finally verbalized. I considered it. Let me think about it. She nodded. Of course. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward me. What's this? I found it in Joan's things after she passed. She said it was meant for you. I opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate gold necklace. A locket. I recognized it immediately. She used to wear it every Sunday. I clicked it open. Inside was a tiny photo of me at 5 years old and a folded slip of paper. I unfolded it carefully. In Grandma Joan's handwriting were the words, "Never forget what you're capable of, even when they do." Tears welled before I could stop them. I closed the locket and held it tight in my palm. She always saw you, my mother whispered, even when we didn't. I nodded. She left me the house, I said quietly. In her will. I know. I plan to keep it, restore it, maybe turn it into a creative retreat for young women starting over. She smiled a little. That sounds like something she would have loved. We sat there in silence, the air a little less tense, the space between us a little less jagged. Maybe this wasn't about winning anymore. Maybe it never was. It was about choosing to become more. Not to prove others wrong, but to prove yourself right. 2 weeks later, Vanessa got married. A lavish affair at a vineyard just outside the city. Think chandeliers hanging from trees, violin quartets playing pop music, and centerpieces so large you could barely see across the table. My mother had started referring to it as the event of the season in her group chats. I had kept my distance during the planning, not out of resentment, but because I had stopped asking to be involved in things I wasn't really welcome to participate in. Until I received the invitation. Hand-delivered, formal, embossed in gold foil. Inside was a handwritten note from Vanessa. I know we've been distant, but I want you there. You matter, even when I don't say it. Love. V. Dot. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it was real. So I went. And this time I didn't walk in unnoticed. I pulled up in my own Rolls-Royce, no longer rented, but purchased the week prior after closing a multi-year consulting contract with a restaurant investment group out of Chicago. They'd discovered me through my blog and were interested in buying into my brand. The first meeting was only supposed to be 30 minutes. It lasted 5 hours. The contract they offered changed my life. Again. As I stepped out of the car, dressed in a navy silk gown and classic heels, people turned. Whispers started, polite but curious. Is that her? Rachel Morgan? I hadn't been to a family function in years that didn't involve hushed judgments behind glassware. This time was different. Philip, my manager, had arranged for a small team to assist with catering oversight, one of the side businesses I'd recently acquired. He greeted me at the valet with a nod and a grin. Everything's running smooth, boss. Thanks, I said. And make sure the bride's cake gets staged early. Vanessa's been nervous about the photos. He gave me a mock salute and disappeared into the crowd. The ceremony was beautiful. Vanessa looked radiant, and I genuinely meant it. As I watched her walk down the aisle, I didn't feel envy or anger. I felt peace. She had followed the path laid out for her, and it fit her. I had forged my own, and it fit me. At the reception, I found my seat at one of the central tables, not off in the corner like past events, not buried in the overflow section behind the gift table. My place card sat directly across from my father. He raised a glass slightly in greeting. Glad you came. Wouldn't miss it. My mother hovered nearby, busying herself with introductions and social pleasantries. But occasionally I caught her watching me, not in judgment. Not even in comparison. Just watching. Halfway through dinner, a family friend leaned across the table. Carol tells us you own that restaurant downtown now. Delaney's, is it? I nodded politely. Yes, and a few others. We're expanding next year. How wonderful. Your parents must be so proud. My father actually smiled at that. We are. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. Later that night, Vanessa pulled me aside. We stood under a tree strung with fairy lights, the vineyard glowing around us like something out of a dream. Hey, she said. Thanks for being here. You didn't have to invite me, I replied. But I'm glad you did. She looked down at her bouquet, then back at me. I heard what Mom said at the engagement party. That caught me off guard. You did? She didn't know I was nearby. I never knew it got that bad between you and them. I'm sorry. Not your fault, I said. But I didn't stop it either, she admitted. I let them talk about you like you were lost. And I should have known better. I do know better. I nodded. You're here now. That matters more. She laughed softly. I told Daniel, the first person I was afraid to introduce to you, that my sister could out-negotiate his entire boardroom if she wanted. I laughed too. Let's hope I never have to. Then she grew serious. I admire you, Rach. I always have. Even when you scared the hell out of me with your choices. Thanks, I said, the words catching a little in my throat. That means more than you know. The music swelled behind us. The DJ had switched to something upbeat, and the dance floor beckoned. You coming? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. We walked back toward the crowd together, two sisters finally standing on even ground, not because we had chosen the same path, but because we had finally chosen to respect each other's. 3 months later, I stood on the porch of Grandma Jones' old house. The ivy had started creeping up the columns again, and the shutters needed repainting. But the porch swing still creaked the same way it had when I was 10 years old, legs too short to reach the floor, listening to Grandma talk about resilience like it was a muscle you could train. It was the first weekend of renovations. The house was mine now, officially transferred, keys in hand, plans drawn. I was turning it into what I always dreamed it could be, a creative retreat for women starting over. Women who had been dismissed, silenced, underestimated, just like I had been. The contractors were arriving the next day, but I wanted to spend one night here first, alone, to feel the energy of the place, to say goodbye to the old ghosts and hello to something new. I wandered through the rooms, fingers trailing along faded wallpaper. The dining table was still there, the one where Grandma taught me to balance a checkbook and where I once cried over a failed exam she told me didn't define me. It felt right to begin again here. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting golden light across the hardwood floor, I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was my father. I met him at the front door. Thought I'd find you here, he said, holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of takeout. I figured you'd call first. He shrugged. Wanted to surprise you. Brought your favorite, Thai, from that little place you used to beg us to try. I stepped aside, letting him in. We ate at the old table, the same chairs still creaking beneath us. There wasn't much small talk, just quiet chewing and the occasional shared glance. But when the food was gone and the silence lingered, he finally spoke. You were always meant for more. I looked up. That's not what you used to say. I know, he admitted. And I was wrong. I thought more meant titles and corner offices. I didn't understand that it could mean freedom, or vision, or building something from the ground up. I let that settle. Then I asked, why now? He sighed. Because I've been thinking. About the way we raised you. About all the moments we dismissed what didn't look familiar. We thought success had one shape. You proved it doesn't. I swallowed hard, surprised by the emotion rising in my chest. I was proud of Vanessa because she followed the path I knew. But I'm proud of you because you didn't. and still made it. There it was. The thing I had wanted to hear since the first time I waited a table and felt like less because of it. I smiled. Thank you. We sat in silence again, but this time it was warm. He glanced around. So this place, you're really going to turn it into a retreat? Yeah, for women who need a reset, who've been talked down to, or pushed out, or made to feel small. Your mother told me. She said it's the most meaningful thing you've ever done. I raised an eyebrow. She said that? He chuckled. She did. She's changing too. Slowly. It's hard for her, being wrong. I nodded. It was hard for me too, but healing starts somewhere. He stood and walked to the living room, picking up a photo of Grandma Joan from the mantel. She'd be proud. She always was, I whispered. Later that night, after he left, I walked outside and stood barefoot on the grass. The moon hung low and the air was heavy with the scent of lilacs. I looked up at the house, peeling paint and all, and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. I no longer needed anyone to clap for me. I no longer craved validation in rooms where I was once laughed at. I had become the woman my younger self needed. Not perfect, but whole. And when I stood in front of those women one day, those future guests of this retreat, I would tell them, you are not just a waitress, or a secretary, or a divorcee, or a single mom, or a woman starting over. You are more than the labels they gave you. And your path is not just valid, it's powerful, just like mine. I still remember exactly how the lights felt on my skin. Too bright, too hot. The kind that made your eyes water if you stared too long. I was standing just behind the heavy black curtain of the stage, heart racing in my chest, holding my breath while pretending not to care. The company I had poured my soul into for 2 years, my late nights, my weekends, my ideas, was finally about to go public with our big win. And I was told to stay backstage. Because I was just the intern. The voice of our new CEO, Mason, rang out across the auditorium, slick and confident like it always was. Today marks a milestone. Our startup Nexora has reached a valuation of $45 million, thanks to the brilliant leadership of our team and the relentless innovation of our engineers. Applause erupted. Except, the lead engineer wasn't on stage, because that would have been me. And I wasn't even invited to sit in the front row. Just 2 years earlier, I had walked into Nexora with a tattered backpack, a burning idea, and a portfolio of messy code. I was still finishing my computer science degree. I wasn't anyone's first choice. I didn't have connections. I didn't wear blazers or speak in buzzwords. But I knew what users wanted. I knew how to build a product that worked. And more importantly, I cared. Cared in the way only underdogs do, when they have nothing to lose and everything to prove. The app that launched Nexora into the spotlight? I designed the wireframes on a napkin at a sandwich shop. I wrote the first 10,000 lines of code alone in my bedroom, fueled by instant noodles and Spotify playlists called Don't Give Up Yet. And yet here I was, standing in the dark while Mason smiled for the cameras, saying things like, our breakthrough AI features were a team effort, and we've built something extraordinary together. Together. He hadn't even been hired until we were already in beta testing. He'd walked in 6 months ago, all charm and spreadsheets, shaking hands like he owned the place. The board loved him. He had vision, the kind that involved meetings and golf and buzzwords like scalability and monetization. He never asked me about the app's infrastructure. He never stayed late when servers crashed. He never once thanked me personally. But he did know how to take credit. When I approached him before the event to ask if I'd be on stage too, just for a moment, maybe to demo the app I wrote, he smiled without smiling. Lizzie, you're so valuable to the team, he said. But this event is about optics. Investors don't need to meet every coder behind the curtain. Every coder. Like I was just one of many. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the lump in my throat had already formed, and I knew if I opened my mouth, something embarrassing might come out. So I just nodded. And now, backstage, I watched him call out names. The lead innovation officer, who once called JavaScript Java whatever. The PR director, who still didn't know how to update her phone. The guy who wrote our website copy. And got a front row seat. And not once did he say my name. At the end of the event, they rolled out the new team slide. My heart skipped when the screen lit up. There I was. Except, I wasn't. My photo was gone. My name, my title, erased like I never existed. I stood frozen as the audience clapped, my face flushed with shame, then rage, then something colder. Clarity, because they didn't just overlook me. They erased me on purpose. 2 days later, I woke up to a different kind of betrayal. I opened my laptop, typed in my login, and got an error message. Access denied. Slack? Disconnected. Email? Disabled. Even my company badge stopped working. They had cut me off. No warning, no call. Not even a courtesy email. Just gone. The same app they were now showcasing to investors, to press, to the world, was still running. Still branded as Nexora's crown jewel. But the version they had copied before cutting me out? It wasn't the final version. And it didn't contain the one thing they needed most. The heartbeat of the system. The real-time logic engine I had written from scratch. Because what they didn't know, what Mason never bothered to ask, was that the working code they kept was actually a placeholder. And the real engine was still sitting in my private Git repository, waiting. As I stared at the lifeless login screen, I felt the panic that had started to rise melt into something else. A slow, deliberate smile. They had no idea what they had just done. Not yet. But they were about to find out. I spent the next few hours in silence. Not sad. Not angry. Just still. My apartment was quiet, save for the low hum of my monitor and the occasional creak of the building settling. It was the kind of silence you get right before a storm. And in that stillness, I opened my private repository. The real one. The one with the full production engine. The one they didn't even know existed. You see, I learned the hard way during my first internship that companies love to cut corners when the stakes get high. I had written a beautiful analytics tool for a marketing firm once, only to be dismissed without warning the day it was finished. They used my code anyway. I had no contract, no protection, no leverage. I was 19. I cried for a week, but not this time. This time, I built safeguards. The version Nexora was currently running, the one they copied from my shared dev folder, was a safe build. It looked like it worked. It even passed the basic unit tests. But without the real-time logic engine, it was just a pretty interface wrapped around empty promises. The data parsing wouldn't scale. The AI modules were hard-coded. And worst of all, the billing integration was incomplete. If they rolled out this version to international users, like Mason promised at the press conference, it would crash. Not maybe. Not possibly. It would fail. Payment would loop. Data would stall, and worst-case scenario, they'd trigger fraud detection protocols from major gateways. The kind of failure that leaves a mark. Still, I wasn't rushing to pull the trigger. Not yet. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for recognition. For truth. For dignity. I wanted them to know exactly what they had done. And more importantly, why it mattered. I called Noah first. Noah was one of the original co-founders. Quiet, brilliant, awkward in meetings, but always respectful. He'd gone part-time after a family emergency and wasn't involved in the press event. But I knew he would care. When he picked up, I barely had to say anything. My name alone made him pause. "Lizzie," he said, "I've been trying to reach you. What's going on? Your Slack account disappeared. They removed me, I said flatly. What? I woke up this morning and everything was gone. No access, no email. They erased me. He was silent for a moment. Then, that doesn't make sense. You wrote the engine? Noah, I said carefully. They're running the wrong build. Another pause. The pre-release version? The placeholder, I confirmed. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Oh my God. Do they know? They will, I said. Soon. He didn't say much after that. Just, I'll call you back. And then the line went dead. While I waited, I pulled up the public dashboard Mason had proudly shown off at the event. It looked impressive. Charts, user metrics, a map pulsing with live interactions. But I knew the truth. Those metrics were cached. Old data being replayed from a static file. A trick. A lie. And as they pushed the app out to our early international beta users, I knew what was coming. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. Noah. They're panicking, he said. Support is getting flooded. Billing is failing. Customers can't log in. The dev team doesn't know what's wrong. Mason's losing it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Instead, I felt a strange ache in my chest. Because I didn't want the app to fail. I'd built it to help people. Small business owners trying to automate their client scheduling, freelancers trying to manage leads. It was never supposed to be a trophy for executives. It was supposed to mean something. And now it was burning. Because I wasn't invited to the table. Noah continued. I told them to call you. I said they needed to fix this, and you were the only one who could. I shook my head. Too late for that. You're sure? They deleted me, Noah. They removed my name from the codebase, from the website. They chose this. He sighed. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. But they need to learn. This isn't just about ownership or credit. It's about trust. About knowing the difference between using people and building with them. Before we hung up, Noah said one more thing. They thought you were disposable, he said. But it turns out you were the foundation. And those words stuck with me. That night, I received my first email from Mason since being removed. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even direct. It came through the CTO, a guy I barely knew. Subject line, urgent build request. Please advise. Body. Hi, Lizzie. We're experiencing unexpected issues with the latest deployment. Would appreciate your insight on some legacy code integration. Are you available for a quick sync? Legacy code. They were already trying to reframe it, as if my engine was a ghost from the past instead of the core of everything they were showcasing. I didn't reply. I just watched the system status page flicker from operational to partial outage. And I knew. This was just the beginning. The next morning, the headlines started to trickle in. Not from the big outlets, yet, but from the tech blogs that watch startups like Nexora, like Hawks. Nexora's breakthrough app stumbles during global rollout. Payment failures, login glitches. What's going on at Nexora? Valuation high, functionality low. Is Nexora all talk? I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the articles with a calm I didn't entirely recognize. There was no joy in it, no schadenfreude. Just a quiet satisfaction that truth, for once, wasn't being buried. I poured coffee into my favorite mug. It said, "Trust me, I'm the dev." Ironic now. My inbox had ballooned overnight, from silence to chaos. Messages from junior developers I used to mentor, former interns, even a few members of marketing. They didn't know the whole story, but they knew something was wrong. They could feel the shift in the air. I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. Instead, I opened the email from Nexora's CTO again. I stared at that line. Legacy code integration. And reread it slowly. They wanted access, not understanding. A solution, not a conversation. And certainly not accountability. But then something unexpected happened. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. On the third call, I picked up. Lizzie, it's Michelle. From the board, I blinked. Michelle? I'm sorry to call directly, but Mason's been less than forthcoming with answers. I asked point blank about the app's architecture. He dodged. Then I saw your name was gone from the team page. I put two and two together. I stayed silent. I want to hear your side of the story, she added. So I told her. Not everything. Not yet, but enough. I explained the development path, the original architecture, the stripped-down placeholder version they'd copied. I explained how I'd built a layered permission system for the app's logic engine, and how that engine was never committed to the shared repo. I told her about the access denial, the erasure, the email calling my work legacy code. When I finished, Michelle exhaled. I had a feeling, she said. You're not the first brilliant mind I've seen pushed out by ego. But I promise you, you won't be the last to stand up and get your name back. I wanted to believe her. Are you calling on behalf of the board? I asked. No, she said. I'm calling because I'm tired of watching founders and CEOs pretend products fall from the sky. We invest in people, not just press conferences. That sentence hit deeper than I expected. Then she asked the question that changed everything. If we invited you to speak at an emergency stakeholder meeting, would you come? I hesitated. My gut screamed yes. My heart whispered no. I wasn't looking to grandstand. I wasn't interested in payback, not if it meant becoming like them. But I also knew this was a chance, maybe the only chance to set the record straight. On my terms. I'll consider it, I said finally, but only if I can speak freely. No PR edits, no slide decks, just the truth. Michelle didn't pause. You'll have the floor. By the end of the day, I received an official calendar invite. Emergency shareholder briefing, app stability, infrastructure, and strategic oversight. It was scheduled for Friday, 3 days from now. 3 days. I spent the first night drafting notes. Not a speech, just a truth map. What I'd built, how it worked, why it mattered. I included diagrams, timelines, snippets of real commits with my GitHub signature. Everything time-stamped, documented, indisputable. On the second day, Mason finally reached out. A voicemail again. His voice, for the first time, didn't sound smug. It sounded strained. Lizzie, hey, look, I realize there have been some miscommunications. I think we both know there's been pressure on all sides, and I may have made some assumptions that weren't fair. Let's put that behind us. I'd really like to sit down and work through this. No apology, just negotiation. It confirmed everything I already knew. Mason didn't want to make things right. He wanted to make them quiet. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Michelle. I'll be there Friday, I said, and I'll bring everything. That night, I sat on my balcony as the city buzzed below. The skyline was a mess of blinking lights in motion, but I felt oddly still, like the eye of a storm. Because this wasn't just about an app anymore. It was about being erased. And now, I had a seat at the table. Friday came like a quiet avalanche, the kind you feel building days before it hits. But when it finally arrives, everything is too still, too controlled, too rehearsed. I dressed carefully that morning. Not for them. For me. A charcoal blazer over a simple blouse. No flashy logos, no power heels. Just comfort, clarity, and control. I tied my hair back the way I used to when coding late into the night. When the world disappeared and only the logic remained. By 9 a.m., I arrived at Nexora headquarters. I didn't take the employee entrance. I walked straight through the front doors, past the gleaming wall-size screens flashing user growth stats, and into the main elevator, where the receptionist offered me a forced smile. They're expecting you on floor 7, Ms. Lin. Thanks, I said, voice calm. The doors closed behind me. Floor 7 was normally reserved for major investor presentations. It had frosted glass, white walls, and the kind of minimalist furniture that screams, "We spent more on this room than your salary last year." It was perfect for what I had in mind. When the elevator opened, I was met by Michelle and two other board members. All three stood, greeted me formally, but their eyes held something different. Recognition. Not just of my presence, but of my importance. We shook hands. Inside the conference room, the table was already full. Mason was there, of course, sitting at the head with his usual overconfidence and a stack of papers he wouldn't read. The CTO sat to his left, expression tight. Legal counsel, a few investors, and a handful of senior engineers filled out the rest. There were laptops, coffees, nervous glances, but not a single smile. I sat across from Mason, didn't speak, didn't look away. Michelle opened the meeting. We're here today to clarify the origin, structure, and current integrity of the Nexera platform. Lizzie Lynn has requested to present her contributions directly. She looked at me. Lizzie, you have the floor. I stood slowly, unzipping the slim black portfolio I'd brought with me. No slides, just facts. I'm not here for drama, I said, and I'm not here to rehash personal slights. I'm here to show you what's real. I passed around printed documents, diagrams, timestamps, Git commits, technical overviews. I had highlighted the logic engine that served as the app's core, complete with version histories and digital signatures that traced back to me. Then I pulled out a printed version of the internal codebase, the placeholder version Mason had launched with. I flipped to the billing integration module. This is the version Nexera deployed to its beta users during global rollout, I said, tapping the paper. This line here, it loops payment tokens without resolving the final transaction state. It's a sandbox loop, meant for testing. Mason's face started to shift. Here's the version I never uploaded to the main repo, I continued, sliding a second packet forward. Fully tested, PCI compliant, live token ready. It's housed in my private repository, which I can prove was built entirely on my own time and hardware outside of Nexera servers. I paused. Then I looked him dead in the eye. You never asked how it worked. You just assumed it would. The silence that followed was dense. Michelle leaned forward. Lizzie, to be clear, you're saying the app's core engine was never actually owned by the company? I'm saying the deployed version was incomplete, and the complete version, the one that works, is mine. Legal scribbled furiously. Mason finally spoke. This is absurd, he said, laughing hollowly. She was an intern, an hourly developer. I wasn't an intern. I cut in, voice sharp but steady. Not by title, not by contribution. And every employment agreement I signed gave me IP rights to self-built tools not submitted to Nexera's repository. I turned to the CTO. You knew. You saw the placeholder commit. You signed off anyway. He paled. Michelle raised a hand. Let's stay focused. Lizzie, can the stable engine be implemented today? Yes, I said, but not by accident, not by force, only by trust, and with a real agreement this time. Mason laughed again, but nobody followed. I sat down. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, one of the investors spoke. So, what exactly do you want, Lizzie? I looked at him, clear-eyed. A title that matches my contribution, a contract that protects my work, and the ability to rebuild this product the way it was meant to be built, from the inside out. And if we say no, I stood. Then the version you have keeps breaking, and when the press asks what happened to your star product, I'll tell the truth. Another pause. Michelle looked around the room. We'll take a short recess. Everyone stood, except Mason. He stayed in his seat, jaw tight, knuckles white around the arms of his chair. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Not of me, but of what I represented. The recess lasted exactly 17 minutes. I spent them alone, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows just outside the conference room. Below, the city buzzed like it always did. Cars threading through intersections, people rushing in and out of glass buildings. But up here, everything felt suspended. Behind me, voices rose and fell. Mason's louder than the rest, filled with bluster. I didn't need to hear the words to know what he was saying. It was classic. Deflect, minimize, redirect. I had seen it before. In meetings, in classrooms, in life. Men like Mason didn't fear being wrong. They feared being exposed. The doors opened. Michelle stepped out. "They're ready for you," she said softly. I walked back in calmly. This time the atmosphere had shifted. Investors sat straighter. Legal had stopped taking notes and started watching me. Mason still wore the same suit, but he looked like it fit differently now, like he was sweating through it. Michelle took her seat and glanced around the room. We've reviewed the documentation, verified timestamps, and consulted legal regarding IP ownership. She looked at me. "We're prepared to make an offer." I sat back down. "Let's hear it." She turned to the head of legal, who cleared his throat and read from a printed sheet. "Nexora is prepared to offer reinstatement as lead product architect, retroactive title adjustment, full credit on all public documentation of the Nexora app, and a permanent seat on the product oversight committee. In addition, a new employment contract will grant shared rights to any future core engine development, with a profit-sharing clause attached." Mason opened his mouth, but a sharp glance from Michelle stopped him cold. I was silent. Not because I was unsure. Because I wanted the silence to stretch. I needed them to feel the weight of what they were asking. Not just the technical fix, but the human cost of erasing someone and then expecting a seamless return. "I want one more thing," I said finally. Heads turned. "I want written protection for any developer on my team. Past, present, or future. No NDA threats, no quiet terminations, no ghosting contributors. We work transparently, or we don't work at all." One of the investors raised a brow. "That's a pretty strong demand." I met his eyes. "So is building your product from scratch." Michelle gave a small nod. "Approved." "And Mason?" I asked, turning to him for the first time that hour. "What's his role moving forward?" Michelle looked at the other board members. There was a quiet exchange of nods. "Effective immediately," she said. "Mason will step down from CEO duties. He'll remain in an advisory role until the end of the quarter, after which the board will revisit his future with the company." I nodded. "Then we have a deal," Mason finally snapped. "This is ridiculous," he barked, standing up. "You're giving her everything because of a few bugs? She was an intern. You think she can run a company?" "No," Michelle said calmly. "But she can build one. And that's more than you've done." The room went still. Mason looked around, hoping for support. But none came. Then he looked at me. "You'll regret this," he said under his breath. I stood slowly. "No, Mason. You will. Because when you call someone just the intern, what you're really saying is, I can't recognize value unless it comes in a suit and tie." He left without another word. After the meeting, I returned to my apartment and collapsed into my desk chair. The silence was no longer heavy. It was liberating. I opened my inbox, flooded. Developers I'd worked with in the past. A few old professors. Even tech reporters sniffing around the app's crash and mysterious architecture issues. I ignored the press. Instead, I opened a blank document titled New Foundations, Rebuilding the Nexora Core. This time, I wasn't doing it alone. The next week, I assembled a small team. People who had been pushed out quietly. Coders who never spoke up in meetings but always delivered. Designers who had ideas but were told they didn't match the brand. I brought them in. We started reviewing everything. Code, UX, scalability, the works. We restructured the logic engine, implemented real-time performance tracking, rebuilt the billing module with multilingual UI and full accessibility. We didn't just fix the broken pieces. We made them better. And this time, every contributor's name went into the credits. No exceptions. At the next all-hands meeting, I stood at the front of the room. No curtain, no backstage pass, no dimmed identity. I wasn't introduced as a genius or a hero. Just, this is Lizzie. She's the reason we're still standing. And that was enough. But I knew it wasn't over yet. Not entirely. Because legacies don't vanish with pink slips. They linger. And Mason? He wasn't finished. The quiet didn't last long. 2 weeks after the rebuild launched, Nexora was back in the headlines. This time for the right reasons. The new architecture was praised. The international rollout resumed without a glitch. Customer feedback surged with 5-star ratings, and investors exhaled. A few even called it a rare redemption arc in tech. But behind the headlines, something else was brewing. I started noticing it in small ways first. An error message that wasn't mine. A calendar meeting invite I never sent. Then one morning, I opened my personal laptop and found an attempt to reset my email password. 3 times. It wasn't random. It was targeted. I knew who it was before I even asked. Mason. He still had contacts inside. Loyalists. People who didn't care what he'd done. Only what he represented. Money, status, power. And I was the symbol of everything he lost. So he did what people like him always do when they lose control. He tried to poison the well. False complaints about hostile leadership. Anonymous HR tips claiming I was erratic, emotionally unstable. One even said I'd falsified my credentials. All of them easily disproven. But it didn't matter. The whispers had begun. And I knew from experience, whispers can be more dangerous than outright lies. I sat in my new office one evening, staring at a Post-it on my wall. It had 3 words scribbled in Sharpie. Build, prove, protect. It was a mantra I wrote during my first year at Nexora, back when I still thought being great at your job was enough to earn respect. Now I understood that being great wasn't the end. It was the beginning. You had to protect what you built. That week, I initiated an internal audit. Again, this time I led it myself, with full authority from the board. I brought in third-party digital forensics. We checked logs, firewall attempts, even non-company devices pinging internal systems. It wasn't just about catching Mason. It was about sending a message. That this was a different Nexora now. 3 days into the audit, we found it. A cloned login string pinged from an old contractor's IP address. That contractor had been referred by Mason months ago. Someone who never completed onboarding, but whose credentials still worked. Buried in an inactive user list. I brought it straight to the board. Michelle's expression was unreadable at first. Then she said, "He's still trying to run this place from outside." "He's trying to burn it down," I said. She leaned back in her chair. "Then maybe it's time we make it official." That afternoon, the board convened and voted. Unanimous. Mason's advisory contract was terminated. All remaining access revoked. A formal statement was prepared. Not for the press, but for us, the people who actually built the company. It read, "Leadership is not a title. It's a responsibility. Nexora acknowledges and condemns the actions that undermined that responsibility. We stand by the builders." It was more than I expected, more than I needed, but not more than we deserved. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, no signature. Just one sentence written in neat, sharp handwriting. "Congratulations. Enjoy your little empire." For now. I didn't even flinch. Because here's the thing. I had already won. Not by retaliation, not by sabotage, but by enduring the storm and refusing to give away my name. I didn't just build code. I built culture. I built boundaries. And I built the kind of company I wish had existed when I was 19, crying in my dorm room after being fired the first time someone stole my work. That version of me? She would be proud of this one. Now, every new dev hired at Nexora gets a small welcome kit. Laptop, onboarding docs, and a hardcover notebook with our 3 words stamped in bold on the cover. Build, prove, protect. And inside, the very first page reads, "Your ideas matter. You matter. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Some ask if it's overkill, a bit dramatic, too sentimental for tech. But those people never had their names erased from something they bled to build. I walk the halls now and people nod, smile, make eye contact. Not because I intimidate them, but because they see me. They know what I stood through and what I stood for. And that, more than any press release, any payout, any shiny new office chair, is what I'll carry forward. Not just as Lizzie the architect, not even as Lizzie the leader, but as Lizzie, the girl who stayed quiet once, and then rewrote the story,